Hey, what's up everybody? Fuller here. Thanks so much for checking out the channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about how to build a swing knob using Metasounds to get that ever so funky groove in your rhythm tracks. So it looks a little something like this. I call it the swing knob. Here's 0% swing. Here's 98% swing or 90% swing. Yeah, 100% swing. Here we go. Pretty cool stuff. Check it out. Pretty cool stuff. That's our swing knob. So that's how the swing knob works, and for those of you who don't know what swing is, you're probably not even watching this video. So I'm assuming if you're watching this video, you know what swing is, and you've probably thought yourself too, how can I get a swing knob in here? So my buddy Gabriel and I were talking the other day about, we need to figure out how to make a swing knob in Metasounds. So put my pen to paper, literally, and I came up with this. So this isn't going to be an extremely long video, but I do want to just kind of talk real quickly about what swing is. So in music, you have subdivisions of rhythm notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, sixteenth notes, etc. And so those are usually exactly half of the bigger one. So a quarter note, an eighth note is exactly half of quarter note, 16th note is exactly half of an eighth note. So when you play a rhythm, it sounds like this. That's a straight. That's called a straight groove. It's exactly mathematically divisions of the eighth note. When you swing something, you shift over some of the eighth notes closer to the next one, so it gives it this kind of feel where it's like There are all sorts of types of swing as well. Some of the earlier drum modules and some of the like the Akai, the MPC, and all the modern drum modules now have swing knobs on them where they shift the groove of everything, and a lot of them have percentages, usually between like 50% and 80% is what would be musical. Somewhere in there around 60% is like what we would call a shuffle or like a triplet feel. So that's kind of like the concept of the swing button. So with Metasounds, like anything, anytime I try to solve a problem, the first thing I do is I get out some pencil and paper and I sketch out some concepts. And that's what I did in this. Here's actually, I was having coffee with a friend today, and as I was waiting on him, I sketched this out, how to do a swing knob. I had to figure out what the math was. See right here, Metasound swing knob. And I figured if you took any BPM and divided it by 60, that would give you how long a quarter note is. And then if you divide that by half, that would give you how long an eighth note would be. So that would give you the length. So this math here, original BPM divided by 60 divided by 2, gives you the length of an eighth note. So then once you get the length of an eighth note, you multiply that between 1 and 100, or in our case, 0 to 1, and that's going to give us a percentage, what we call the swing amount. And so I set that, and then once I figured out the math, so basically what a swing is doing is it is delaying the upbeat eighth notes. Here's the interesting thing about when you swing a groove. Strong beats do not get swung. So the 1, 2, 3, 4 don't get swung, the ands get swung. And so we had to build a Metasound. The next problem was to build a Metasound that would allow you to shift the eighth notes on the weak beats. And so that's what I did. And here it is, our swing knob. So what I want to do in this video is just walk through briefly exactly how I built it. We're going to talk about the blueprint, we're going to talk about the Metasound, we're going to talk about the Metasound patch, and we're going to talk about the swing knob itself. So let's jump right in. So the layout here is pretty simple. I have a big, huge knob here, and then I've got this cool landscape. You know me, I like to have a bunch of cool stuff happening. I do think this knob is fire, so I thought it'd be appropriate to put some fire in there. And then I have this little thing just marking where the setting is. this representing 0. So nothing too fancy here. Most of the magic is being done in the Metasound and the Metasound patch. This knob, however, is sending us information, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. So let's look at the knob itself. So here's the knob we built. It's just a blueprint where I've got this knob mesh here, and then I've got this other logo here because I thought it'd be cool to put a little swing logo. You like that? It's pretty fancy. The Swing King knob, and that just kind of represents an eighth note is more like a triplet, like triplet. So bum, ba bum, ba bum. So that's kind of how people usually notate swing. So let's look at the event graph, and then this is going to be. So we're going to talk first about the work that the knob itself is doing. Once the game starts, we are enabling input. Right? We have to enable input because what we're doing is we're using the letter M and the letter N to control the knob. M moves the knob up, N moves it back down. And that's just the QWERTY I chose. You could use anything really. You could use touchscreen, you could use a controller, whatever you want to do. In this case, we're using M and N. So once we enable input, we can now send that information to the knob. This first block of blueprint is just the animation of the knob. All we're doing is M plays the timeline and N reverses the timeline, and then either one of those released stops the timeline. What the timeline is doing is it's setting the rotation of the knob so we can physically see the knob move. You don't really have to have that, but it's always good to have player feedback so you know that, okay, that's moving. And so what we're doing is we're getting this cylinder right here. We're getting the rotation of this cylinder, and then we're feeding it, and we're setting the relative rotation. The X and Y axis stay the same, but the Z axis we're actually going to rotate. And if you open up this timeline, you'll see we're going from we're going from 90 degrees all the way up to 430 degrees. That number just worked out so that the 0 was where I wanted it to be. As you can see here, the 0 is not here, it's over here. So that just allows us to rotate that knob that many degrees. And so if you look at the math and you go, from 90 to 430, so we're looking at 270 degrees of motion, which is 390 degrees. So that's pretty much almost a circle. And so that's our timeline, and that's just the animation. Now, here's what's important. We take this animation number, which is a float, from 90 to 430, and you'll see over here I brought this out, and I'm clamping this range. So I want 90 all the way to 430 to translate 0 to 1. So when you start at 90, that's 0. When you get to 430, that's 1. So basically the entire turn of the knob is 0 to 1. And we want to use that parameter because it's a great parameter set to use for Metasounds. 0 to 1 is a great parameter set to use for Metasounds. Now the other thing we want the knob to do, and this is really important, when the knob is moving, we want to send out this event. We created this event dispatcher called send swing amount. And what we're doing is we're sending the swing amount. And this event dispatcher has this variable amount of called swing amount, and we are hooking up the same the animation as it animates. 0 to 1 is being sent. So when this knob is moving, it's sending this event dispatcher with whatever the number is, 0 to 1, and we're going to use that number to feed the Metasound. That 0 to 1 is now we're going to use that to calculate the amount of swing that we want to impose into the Metasound. So that's how the knob works. Not too complicated. The event dispatcher is a little, if you've never done that, it can get a little complicated. I do have a video on how to use event dispatchers with Metasound, so you go check that out if you want. But basically what we're doing is we're calling it here, and we're going to bind it in the blueprint. Now, let's move on to, all right, so we talked about the swing knob. Okay, now let's go to the level blueprint, okay? So we're doing one thing in the level blueprint. Over here in the third person map level blueprint, the only thing we're doing here is we're simply binding that event from the swing knob. So we're receiving this event on begin play. We get the actor of class called swing knob, and then we're binding that send swing amount. This is the send swing amount. We're binding that to a custom event that I didn't name. I should have named it, but whatever. I'm a little sloppy today. This event will be triggered every time that knob moves, and so it updates that 0 to 1 in real time. Now that's the information we're going to use to feed the Metasound to adjust the swing. So we're animating the button and we're sending 0 to 1, and then over here we're getting the setting the float parameter to this Metasound. Now this BP swing Metasound is actually in the level. It's right here. So we just imported our BP Metasound into the level, and I'm going to show you how we made that because that's the cool part. We got the Metasound here. We are sending this float information 0 to 1 to this Metasound name called swing knob. And then I just got a print string here. That's why you can see it over here to the left. You can see that is the amount where we're at. It's where we're at in the timeline, translated 0 to 1, and that's going to end up being a percentage of the swing. Okay, so now grab a cup of coffee, grab a drink, whatever you need to do, take a little breather, because now we're going to jump into the fun part, which is the purpose of this whole channel is the Metasound itself. We've got two things happening here. We got a Metasound called BP Swing, and then inside this Metasound we have Metasound patches. Now in the last video I did, I talked about, or 2 videos ago, I talked about the difference between Metasound patches and Metasounds. So this is a great application of that, and you'll see why in a minute, because it really speeds up the workflow and it allows us to do what we want to do. So the first thing I want to do is I want to look at the Metasound patch. So this is kind of like the instrument that we're playing inside the Metasound, and this is where a lot of the cool magic happens. So let's look at this. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. All right, so the core of the Metasound patch are these 4 wave players. Now, I decided to just do a 1-bar loop, basically a 1-bar musical phrase to demonstrate the swing knob. The more beats you do, obviously, the more, the bigger the Metasound will be. So for this, I just wanted to do a small one, just to demonstrate it. It's scary how I cheated. But we've got this one. We've got this one, and this one. Now you'll notice under the wave asset, we have created this input. This is an input because you'll see in the Metasound itself, we're gonna use this patch to play the kick, to play the snare, and to play the hi-hat. So we're using all of this logic to play all 3 of those instruments, and you'll see why that's powerful. Again, check out my Metasound patch video if you haven't seen that. So we've got wave players here representing each beat, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we're coming out to the mixer, so all those are mixed together. We have a variable here so that we can later in the Metasound tell what sound we want to use. In this case, a kick, snare, and a hi-hat. Then let's skip this for now. This is because this is the magic of the knob. Let's go over here. Over here we have beat steps. Okay, so what I did is I created a beat step for each of these wave players. So let's say we're on the hi-hat channel. Each one of these is going to play a hi-hat on 1, 2, 3, and 4. I wanted to use a different player for each beat. And the reason I wanted to do that is because the delay trigger works way better that way. So let's skip over here to the beginning of the Metasound. So we have this input trigger called start, and you'll see over here, this is the inside of the Metasound patch. This is the outside of the Metasound patch. When I double click on this, it opens this, right? So this patch here, input start 1, is what we're going to use to trigger this patch from the Metasound. Once we trigger it, we're going to set a trigger repeat at this tempo, BPM, which is also an input. And if you look over here, here's a BPM, so we can feed that input. BPM is really important because the BPM in this case is going to calculate the amount of swing that we want. So we've got the BPM over here that feeds, this is an input, it feeds the BPM here. We're trigger repeating on quarter notes. So every time it plays a quarter note, it triggers this sequence. First quarter note's going to trigger this trigger control, and it's going to go to here. Second beat is going to trigger here, and it's going to go to here, etc. So these 4 triggers represent basically activating that beat, if you will. Okay. And the reason I put those in there is because I want to be able to turn off and on those steps. We call them music. In the music sequencing world, we'll call them a step. So beat 1 is step 1, beat 2 is step 2, etc. Now, if you'll notice here, in between beat 2 and beat 4, because again, these are the weak beats. So it's like 1 and 2 and. Now I'm saying beats, right? So in theory, this is beat 1, 2, 3, 4. However, I'm going to divide this in half. So this is actually going to become 1 and 2 and. And so the and of this beat becomes the beat that we want to swing. And so all a swing now is we're taking the soft, this might be getting a little complicated, but just stick with me here. We're taking the weak beat of the measure and we're delaying it a certain amount. The amount that we delay it determines when it plays. So instead of da 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 da, it's like da 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 da, because again 1 and 2 are the same, and then the ands are off. So this delayed trigger node is what we're doing. So we're triggering this in time, 1 and 2 and, but then when this trigger comes out, we're delaying it. And this one, we're delaying it, but we're delaying it based on a musical calculation, which is what we have calculated to be the swing. So we're pulling these out over here, and instead of using the same BPM, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this BPM, and this is where the magic happens. You gotta pay close attention to this. We're gonna calculate the distance of an eighth note, and then we're gonna set a percentage of that for the delay. So whatever this tempo is, we come out here, we go BPM to seconds, right? Because we want to convert that into an actual time. And then we get the seconds here. And now what we're going to, so if you see here on the BPM, we're using quarter notes. But down here, we cut that 0.5. So what this is doing is we're taking this BPM, which in this case right now is 90. But instead of triggering it on quarter notes, we're triggering it on eighth notes. So that eighth note is now we know how long an eighth note is. That's basically what this is telling us. We're taking, if the BPM is 90, tell us how long an eighth note is in seconds. And then boom, that's your number. Now, we don't want to delay it that much because that would basically be delaying it until the next eighth note and you technically wouldn't hear anything. So what we're doing is we're going to multiply this number from 0 to 0.9. Now you could go all the way to 1, but 1 defeats the purpose because that literally is the next quarter note, because that's the exact distance of a quarter note or an eighth note to an eighth note. It's the distance of the next eighth note. So what we're doing is we're taking the distance of an eighth note and we're multiplying it. So if you multiply the distance of an eighth note times 0, you get 0. So there's 0 delay. So when the swing knob is on 0, it's not delaying anything. However, if you take this up to, let's say, 0.3, we'll go up to 0.3. Now what you're doing is you're basically taking a third of that distance. So you take the distance of a eighth note and you're taking a third of that distance and you're delaying that. You see how this math is working? And so by increasing this multiplier, you're increasing the amount of time that eighth note, offbeat eighth note is delaying, thus giving us a swing. Now, that's how this Metasound patch works. One other little piece is here on this toggle. What this toggle does is it turns on the trigger control, so it can allow the trigger to pass. So if that's off, the trigger doesn't go through. So it's basically kind of a way of silencing that beat. So if all of these triggers were closed, you would hear nothing. If just the first one was open, you would only hear the downbeat, etc. I put these in here because what I want to do is I want to use this Metasound patch, but I don't want the kick, snare, and hi-hat all be happening on every beat. So we left these triggers. So during any Metasound, we can turn on or off these specific beats. So that's how the Metasound patch works. let's go over to the Metasound. I said B. I called it BP swing. It shouldn't be a BP swing. It's actually not a blueprint. This is actually a Metasound. But I'm not going to change the name right now because I might mess something up. So this is the Metasound that we called swing. As you can see, this Metasound patch that we built, this drum module, if you will, there's 3 of them here. Each of these layers, we have a hi-hat layer, kick layer, and a snare patch layer. Now, looky here. So in this wave asset, what we're able to do is we're able to bring off a variable. This one's set to hi-hat. Bring off a variable. This one's kick. Bring off a variable. This one's set to snare. Now, by doing that, we literally just used that Metasound patch to use all of that logic for 3 different instruments like that. That's what the power of the Metasound patch. These come out here and get submixed together down to the main output. And then there's one little thing that I did here. So here we have the global BPM. Whatever we set this to, let's just set it to 120. This is going to send the BPM to our Metasound patches, right? And then this BPM is going to receive that information and it's going to take on that beat. So we can use any tempo we want right here. All of those are going to be clients for that BPM. Now, you'll notice I set the BPM here, I set the BPM here. But up here, again, I put a multiplier because this hi-hat one, I want it to play twice as fast. So like I was saying earlier, so the kick and the snare are all going to be playing 1, 2, 3, 4. But the hi-hat's going to be going 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. And the reason I did that was just basically a shortcut so that I could demo this. But so that what that's going to allow us to do is we're going to delay 2 and 4, which is going to be the weak beat. Over here we have the swing knob input. And what this does, this is what actually sends the percentage, if you will, from 1 to 0 to the swing knob, which is right here. Did I say 0 before? Yeah, I did say, yeah, from 0. Yeah, so this is going to send from 0 to 1 into our swing knob, which is going to change that length of swing. So that's really important. And then that obviously is attached to our actual knob, which is feeding that. So here's where that knob is feeding this information. So that this swing amount here, which is being sent into the set float parameter, swing knob, remember that from the beginning? That's going right here. It's called swing knob. So that's where that's getting fed to. So wherever our animation is from 90 to 430, I think we said, or 460, this is going to be translating that 0 to 1. So 0%, 100% swing. And then that's going to determine the swing amount. One other quick thing too, I have this set up in a way so that when I play it, you only hear the kick drum on 1 and 3, and you only hear the snare drum on 2 and 4. Because as soon as I hit play, it triggers these gates. Step 2 gate and step 4 gate is off. So here, step 2 and 4 turns off. And then the same with these, the opposite. Step 1 and 3 turn off. In this case, it'd be 1 and 3. So for the snare drum, it would be the 2 and 4. And for the kick, it would be 1 and 3. However, the hi-hat plays on what would be perceived as eighth notes. So all together, and you can see here, the swing knob is feeding all of these. Now something to know about swing is that if you listen carefully, the kick and snare never change. It's just the hi-hat. Because in swing, like I said earlier, the downbeats, the strong beats, which in this case 1, 2, 3, and 4, they don't shift. They stay on the downbeat because all of the swing becomes then relative to that downbeat. And so that's why. So if I muted, let's just say for fun, let's unhook the hi-hat for a second. Listen, here's kick and snare only. Nothing's changing. Only the hi-hat is changing, which thus creates the awesome groove. It's a groove. Swing is a relative thing, right, man? Swing is a relative thing. We're swinging based on the downbeats, and there you go. And now if I muted the snare and the kick, you would hear only the hi-hat. And there you have it. Let me hook these back up. And that's pretty much it for our awesome freaking swing knob. Now this, let me just show you this musically. That sounds kind of like. Totally sounds like Billie Jean. Now here's something to notice with the swing. Some of these aren't very musical, but that's how swing works. That's not musical at all. That's about what I would consider a normal swing. That's kind of like a triplet feel. But even some of these subtle swings are super musical. So anyways, that's it for the big swing knob. I hope that this tutorial was insightful and helpful, and I hope you enjoyed it and learned some things. Hey, remember, please like and subscribe and comment on the videos if you can. It helps drive the algorithm, and it helps me continue to make more videos like this. Hope this was helpful. If there's any specific things you'd like to see in the future, feel free to share those in the comment section. But thanks again for checking out the video, and we'll see you in the next one.